Morning, it's Julie. Welcome to the bit outside my house where all the stuff that needs to go to the tip is. So that's an old football table there. It's a good job you can't see the rest. I just thought I would say something because I do a lot of coaching work with people in their early 20s and 30s and what I'm noticing, particularly since the pandemic, is that they want something different. So I was brought up in, I was at school in the 80s, and there was that real sense of having a very linear career and actually probably quite a linear life. So, you went to school. When I went to university, it was free. So if you could do that, you did do that. And then you got a job, and then you went higher and higher up that job. And then at some point you retired. And similarly in your personal life, you dated, but then you dated, you went steady, and then you got engaged, then you got married, then you had children, and then you lived happily ever after. So it was kind of very linear, and actually those two tracks were quite separate. And when I think about that, in some ways, although I was brought up as kind of in the Thatcher era, and I went to a really amazing state school, but was very liberal and very, kind of, I did metalwork and the boys did cooking, and, it was a very liberal school. But in a way, what I look back on and think is that although they were challenging gender stereotypes by saying women can go into engineering, what we all still had was that model of home and work being separate entities. So when I look at a lot of my girlfriends, it's one of the kind of struggles that my generation, so the women who are in their 50s now, faced, was that we had been told that we could have it all. And so, a lot of people that I went to school with have done really well. But what we weren't prepared for was how that works with family. And so I remember kind of when I had my first child, really battling, because my inner kind of role models were work really hard and achieve, and also make sure that you're a good mum and be home for the kids. And they seem to be in direct conflict. And I think I've spent a life trying to balance and work a way through that. But what I'm noticing with a lot of my coaching clients in their 20s and 30s is that they, maybe because of the pandemic, but maybe also because they've experienced life as being so stressful and pressured, actually they want something different. They really do want a life that integrates home and work and allows both of those things to have value. And that's men and women, that both of them want time with family and with work. And so what I'm noticing is that there's not many role models for them out there of people who have lived that kind of life, because I think lots of my generation haven't lived a more integrated kind of life. And that may not be true. So take it with a pinch of salt. But I just, from a series of conversations, I just thought, actually, the one thing that I think I have done from a very early age was I've designed, and I wouldn't have said this then, but I guess I've lived a life based on lifestyle, what I wanted my life to look like, rather than what I wanted from my job. And so I do, I went to university, and I chose that university partly on very poor A-level grades, but also because it was green and by the sea. So I didn't even have a clue what the what the course was. I also chose that course because I could go there with a friend. So looking back, that's exactly what schools tell you not to do. And then I went into marketing. It was the 80s, Beaujolais breakfasts, dinner and dances at the Hurlingham Club, Pims on the lawn, shoulder pads, and I was all right at it. but I couldn't believe that you only got 4 weeks holiday a year. And I just thought, that's not what I want for the rest of my life. And how would that work if I had children? And at that time, I was in no position to have children, no desire to have children. But I just thought, I can't, no amount of money is going to make that worthwhile. So I suppose that was the first point where I started to prioritize a lifestyle, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate it then. So then I went off and did my teacher training because, and I'm eternally grateful to my younger self, because what I did in that decision, I just thought, actually, I want a job that would allow me to travel, because that's what I love, and would allow me to be flexible if I had kids. And that was teaching, and it's absolutely given me those things. And I know not teaching's not for everybody, but I suppose what I'm saying is that sense from a very young age of thinking, what's the life that I want to live? And so I went into teaching, did well enough, was in the south of England, and then again was coming up to where I live now in Wales to visit family. And I just remember watching cousins and their children thinking, wow, this is a much more connected to nature, slower way of life than the kids in Kent I was watching. And so again, my career in Kent was kind of going up and up and up quite quickly. But I made what some people might have said was a kind of foolish career move. But I decided that actually the lifestyle that I wanted to live was where I could live a more, at that time I remember reading about portfolio lifestyles and thinking, yes, I want a more portfolio lifestyle where I can do more things and I don't have to work so hard, and where if I had kids I'd be around to see them. So I moved to Wales and went right down the pecking order and started again in all ways, socially and career wise. And then because I was in a new place, I diversified and I thought, well, I'm going to need some friends. So I went off and did some voluntary work. And then the school that I was in at that time didn't have a sixth form. So I was really missing kind of intellectual challenge. So I went off, and that's when I did the PhD. So again, so at that point, none of this was conscious, but I was really aware that I had different needs. So the hospice work that I didn't do it because it would later help me with my work, which of course now it does, but I did it because I thought this is something I'm interested in. I'd had an experience of an early bereavement myself, so I wanted to help me process that, but I also wanted to meet people. And then doing the PhD with the intellectual stimulus and challenge. So that's what I did. So I was looking at what needs I needed meeting in my life, and went off and did those things, and then fell in love with someone abroad. So again, did a really foolish thing, some people would have said, and resigned from my job without a job to go to in Spain, but took a leap of faith and got a job in Spain. At the last minute managed to rent my house out, and also at the last minute they gave me a secondment. So the reason I went to Spain was definitely following my heart. That's where I met my kid's dad. So again, it was looking at the lifestyle that I want to live. So I was at the age where I wanted kids. I loved being abroad, and then came back with children, and then thought, well, I don't want to be working full time now. So I dropped to part-time, and again, that seemed like career suicide, because at that time, which would have been nearly 20 years ago now, part-timers were seen as a bit of a nuisance and really not committed. And so although the law was on my side then, it definitely wasn't seen as a good career move. But that was fine. I had enough money to cover what I needed to cover as a mum. And then I was still doing the PhD, but then I got offers of interesting work that arose out of the PhD. So I started to do that. And what that gave me, the schoolwork gave me a sort of central spine that paid the bills and put some money towards a pension. But the other work was interesting and really broadened my connections and pushed me so I ended up presenting at national conferences on social and emotional aspects of learning, and I ended up writing a column for a magazine, and just these amazing opportunities, because I'd created a space in my life where I could say, yes, that banging, by the way, is a bird. knocking on the roof. I think it's trying to crack a snail. That's what that is. And then there were times so basically there were times in my life where I've worked full time in education. There's most of the time since having children, I've had essential strands in my life that's been my bread and butter bills and pension employment. And then I've had other work which has kept me interested or introduced me to exciting people or given me opportunities or helped me grow and expand. And a key thing for me was that throughout my kids' primary education in particular, I was at every sports day, every harvest, every I wasn't at the school gate every morning and every afternoon, but I was at least 2 mornings and 2 afternoons a week. And so I knew their friends and I knew the mums at the school gates, and that was really important to me. That was part of the lifestyle I wanted to live. And then I suppose another change, then I became more conscious of what I was doing, probably during the first lockdown, where again I made another massive, well, to some people it would be a massive change, and it does involve risk taking. So again, I had to I leave one job. I'd applied for other jobs, but they hadn't come through. So there was a gap. I was pretty certain I'd get the other jobs, but there was definitely a gap where I was without employment. And, I've got a mortgage and I've got kids and I'm a sole carer. But I suppose, by then I was in my 50s. I kind of had a sense of this will probably be all right. I've done this before. And so this time I was much clearer on, right, what are my needs? So I do one job that gives me almost complete flexibility. I can do it whenever I want, in my pajamas, at any time of night or day. 95% of that job is like that, which is fantastic, because what that means is if it's a bright sunny day like it's been this week, I choose to be outside, or I go for a swim in the river. And if a friend turns up who I haven't seen for a long time, I can say, yeah, I'm free to see you, because I can choose to prioritize my relationships over my work because of that piece of work. But because that piece of work is all home-based and online, actually, it doesn't at all meet my need for belonging and community. So I still work in a local school where I get that sense of belonging and community and connection to the younger generation that I really, really like. But that fixes me a bit, because schools are fixed. So, that's the weakness, which is why it's nice to have it balanced with the very flexible piece of work that I do. I then teach yoga in the local village, and that's it covers its costs. But what it gives me again is connection to local community, friends. It's fun. I love teaching yoga anyway. So I suppose most of the capital that I get back from that is a sense of my kind of wellness and being able to share wellness and community connection. And then my coaching work, some of it's online, some of it's face-to-face. So some of it gives me a sense of connection and belonging. Even online, you get that to a certain extent, but also that's entirely flexible. So I get to, decide when that's going to be. So that's because at this time in my life, what I want is freedom and flexibility to be out in nature when, particularly in the winter when the weather's nice. I was sick of going for walks in the dark, so now I can get up and do the work in the dark, and I go for a walk in the daylight. So I suppose what I'm saying to people is that I think when I talk to people about this, they're kind of surprised that it's possible. And I see so many people who feel like there's only the one way to live a life, because it's still the major discourse or the major narrative, the major story is get a job, get promoted, get money, get a car. But I think because we're at this point where actually people are beginning to see that we can't carry on with some of these models, whatever your politics, whichever side you're on, there's kind of chaos. I don't think anyone can really deny the climate catastrophe now. We know that there's a massive inequality between people that have money and people that don't have money. Obviously, we're all, worried about the cost of living at the moment. And it takes me back to a poster that I remember I used to have on my wall in my 20s, which was a picture of a Native American Indian squaw. Some of you might have had the same picture. And it basically said, once we've cut down all the forests and poisoned all the rivers, we'll find that we can't eat money. And I suppose that's, to me, to have a linear life that has separate silos is a bit like how we farm, that we have monocultures. And there's monocultural fields around here, and the soil's really dead, and they have to put artificial fertilizer on it. Whereas if you look at a polyculture, which is where there's many cultures growing together, it's much more robust, it's much healthier, it's much more self-sustaining and generative. And that's what I find about living a more kind of poly-focused life, is that, of course, what I'm learning in my academic life, I can take into my coaching world, and what I'm hearing in schools links into my academic life, and my research work can feed into all of those areas, and yoga fits into a lot of areas. So actually all these different bits of my life feed into each other. They all bring in social connection. And I suppose one of the things that I'm really able to do is, because I've lived quite a diverse life, I'm quite good at being able to connect people to other people. And for me, that increasingly, this model of straight up or triangles and promotion and hierarchy is broken. It's not how nature works. Nature works in cycles, and it works in webs. And so I suppose I see my life much more as a web, that there's different strands to it. I connect people across strands, and there's kind of a safety in that, because one part of my work, during the pandemic, one part of my work shut down, but I still had another part of my work. And it seems to me, I guess it's always seemed to me to be a pretty risky strategy to put all your eggs in one basket in the workplace, and to invest so much of yourself in something as anonymous as an institution, where you're only a function. Now, of course, there's different ways of working and different types of company, and if you're working for yourself, there's degrees of that. But that when I worked in hospices, or time and again, what people talk about is people and love and relationships and experiences. No one ever says, oh, I'm so glad I got that promotion, or all that money in my bank account is amazing, or God, I've loved all the cars that I bought. There's often, when I was in adult hospices, there was often regret, particularly from men, that they hadn't spent more time with their children, or from women that they hadn't done, that they hadn't had a career, that that older generation. And I just suppose I've always, because I encountered the death of someone close to me when I was in my really early 20s, that was a real eye-opener. I just thought, I want to live a life where I can where there won't be any regrets. And of course there's regrets, times I shouted at the kids, or but they're not big regrets. They're not, who knows? I'm still alive. Let's hope there's no big regrets. But I just wanted to say to people, it's possible, and I think increasingly possible and increasingly desirable, because if you think about what we're up against now, that with the cost of living crisis, yes, we need to earn money, but actually money alone won't feed us. It's our social connections, and paying for childcare at the moment, I know, is astronomical, but actually if we were all working part-time a bit more, we'd do each other's childcare, and we wouldn't be exchanging money, we'd be exchanging relationship. So thinking about how to build on networks and diversity, and to just, I suppose I wanted to just offer an alternative narrative to, you have to have a career plan, to think, actually, really, I'm not sure that's, I think that's a fallacy. So I remember having to do a business plan when I started my coaching business, and they were like, "Oh, you've got to predict how much you're going to be earning." And I just said, "Well, this is like, trying to predict the future. This is bonkers." And they were like, "No, no, no, it's really rational." And they took me through this process, which they saw as really rational. It was not. It was completely bonkers, because how I had no idea. Still will never have any idea how each year is going to go on that side of my business. But to have a vision of what do I need now, and to keep updating it. So my work pattern has changed as my kids have grown up. So they're older now, they don't need me around as much. So I can teach yoga in the evenings, because actually they don't want to talk to me in the evenings anyway. I wouldn't have done that when they were younger. I still don't travel very far for work, because I like to be around. And my son actually broke his collarbone yesterday. And I'd literally just got home from one job, which is that even then that's only 15 minutes away. So I could be there immediately. And that matters to me. And so I suppose it's that thing about, are you living a life that matters to you? Are you getting your need? Money's one need, but so is belonging, so is meaning and purpose, so is social connection. If you've got a family, and that could be older family, younger family, partners, that has a value too. And then the natural world. Yeah, we all saw during the pandemic that we don't have to commute. We can do a lot of work from home, which has to be better for the environment. Noise pollution, air pollution. We already know that air quality is worse than it has been not ever, but in kind of modern industrial times. So having a more local and or online or diverse life allows us to make decisions that are not only good for our well-being and our family, but also for the natural world, because we're starting to think in a more networked way. So that might be waffly, and to some of you that might be not important, but I know that speaking to people in their 20s and 30s, there's a real desire to know that there's a different way. And my way has been to always think about, what kind of life do I want to live, what matters at the moment, and to make work fit into that, rather than to change my whole life for work, because most of us have seen how fickle work is. Lots of people laid off during the pandemic. Yeah, I think I've gone on enough. Anyway, have a good day. I can't find the off button now because I'm sitting in the sun, so I can't see where the cursor's gone. Oh, so I'm just going to do that.